A lot of great stories, but strange and weird too. Mostly this has to do with the fact that they're just old stories from a different culture, from a different time, thousands of years ago. But here's this story, which is sort of, well, it's just strange. Moses, the great leader of God's people, up on the mountain with God, and there Moses receiving the 10 Commandments. So it's a pretty important meeting going on up there, while everybody else is down below. Down there in the valley, that people are growing anxious. And I can understand that anxiety. We are anxious. We live in an anxious time, an anxious age. And it's natural to seek out strongholds for safety and security and stability. And for many people, I was thinking about this and I was thought, well, you know, for many people, America has been that stronghold, a refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble for a long time. Except now that stronghold is showing signs of failure, and people are anxious. What do we do when America is no longer America? The crowd there at the foot of Mount Sinai waited for Moses, wondered where he was. What has happened to Moses? Where is he? We're just sitting here. The whole Exodus project is failing, and we've got to take things up. We've got to take things into our own hands now and get this thing going, get them back on the track. So Aaron, Moses' brother, he's feeling their anxiety. He's feeling the pressure. They're putting it on him, and in his panic, he develops a plan to bring the divine down to the people to dwell among them. And putting on a brave face that belies the anxious fear underneath, he says to the clamoring crowd, "Bring me your gold." And they do. And he fashions for them a kind of a anti-tabernacle or anti-ark for the people in order to bring God down to dwell among the people. And with the golden calf presented there before them, Israel says to themselves, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Aaron desperately wants to cling to the notion that the golden calf should be seen as the Lord's throne, and that this celebration should be a festival to the Lord. So they're calling for the gods, he's calling for the Lord. It's all very confused and messed up. And of all the struggles life brings upon us, there's good reason to be confused about things and wonder where things are going and feel out of control. But I really don't have any concern that any of us are going to make an ark out of jewelry. I don't think it's a problem. And yet, this weird story actually names something that is quite contemporary for us. For in essence, the story is about whether God can be trusted or not. When everything you've trusted in seems to be under threat, when it seems to be failing, when we're losing what it means to be America, for instance. When America is no longer America, it's tempting for us to grab hold and to want to fill the void. If God's not doing it, we'll have to do it. So things are going off the rails at Mount Sinai. Moses has been long delayed. I'm going to start this now. So I figure I got 20 more minutes. And God is nowhere to be found. Where is God? Have you noticed God never does seem to move very quickly. I mean, when he does move, it's quick sometimes, but getting to that moment of movement to begin with, sometimes it just goes so slowly. And God doesn't show up the way we want him to. And we wonder, where are you, God? And can we trust in you, God? And God, on the other hand, seems to be, evidently very patient with us. I mean, just think about it, because about 1 billion years ago, and we all know what that looks like, don't we? Life on Earth was largely single-celled organisms, but then multi-celled cellular organisms began to emerge. And this changed the shape of life on Earth. And this shift from single cell to multi-cell organisms has been called the Cambrian explosion. Explosion, because it happened so fast. And we think about quickly, and think about explosion. We're thinking about something that just happens in an instant, or maybe over the weekend. But this explosion of new life took about 10 to 20 million years. Rapid explosion of new life on Earth. A time span geologists call it just a mere blink of the eye. Okay, so that's too much. I can't imagine what that is. I want to try to put it in context so we can imagine a little bit better what it is. We're living in the foothills of the Appalachians. Appalachians, the mountain range there to our north. And geologists, if you're to believe them, if you believe what the geologists say, this range of mountains began to be formed 480 million years ago. I mean, wow. And they continue to grow for 200 million more years. I mean, I know this is all true because I looked it up on Google. And the size of the mountains rival the Himalayas that we know today. So 480 million years ago, 200 million years ago, 10 to 20 million years ago doesn't seem like that long ago. But one thing it shows is that, if God can be patient like that, waiting for things to form, to take shape, 20 million years to watch life develop, God is patient. And I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for us. If God weren't, He would have given up on us a long time ago. But sometimes God is too patient. We just need God to show up. And we wish God would get on with it. And when you're seeing things you've loved come undone, when you're living in great anxiety and fear for yourselves or your family and children, and you go to the Psalms to help yourself, to help cope, and you cry out to the Lord, "Oh, how long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever?" And you recite the psalm and you pray the psalm, and you find some solace there. But then you have to keep going back and back and back again every day. Life is sort of like that. When Moses failed to return, they decided, the ways of God, we can't really depend on Him. We can't trust God's going to be there for us. And I've never seen times like these days, what we're living in now. I'm not sure that it's unique to most of the world, but it sort of feels unique to me, to us. Past 2 decades, the racial, ethnic divisions, not just in America, but globally, folks across the globe, the racial divisions, the ethnic divisions, and folks in the streets, and they're afraid. They're seeing their identity under threat. British identity. We're losing what it means to be British. If any of you like to watch PBS, you watch all the PBS British shows on TV. If you go to those TV, they're very nostalgic. I mean, they're contemporary and modern, but they're all very nostalgic because everything appears in these tiny little British villages. Happens in these tiny little British villages. And you see a British world that no longer exists, but in these shows, everything exists inside this little British world. Well, it's that way everywhere. We're losing what it means to be French. We're losing what it means to be Hungarian. And for many Americans, the feeling is we're losing what it means to be American. Now, the list goes on. The madness of the war in Ukraine is all about the question of identity. From one perspective, it's an attempt to name a people and to preserve and to protect a people and their identity because it's perceived to be under threat. And America's unique in that it's never really been able to latch on to ethnicity as the core of national identity. We're not Germany, so where it's possible to say Germany is for Germans. What does it mean to be American? There are these crowds, a mix of Christians and non-Christians, atheists, no faith at all, and they can be all on the same page with this. What does it mean to be American? And they're saying it's our unique Christian heritage. Even atheists can say that. And basically, what they are saying, what they mean when they say that is, we're not Muslim. There used to be a time when Catholicism fell outside of the boundary line. They weren't part of America. Even though they were here in the millions, they weren't part of America. But there's this enemy out there, and you got to draw lines, and you got to keep those guys out. But there's this heritage. There's this Christian heritage. That's us. That's America. Samuel Huntington, a well-recognized published sociologist, calls it the Anglo-Protestant heritage. And we can stretch it, maybe call it. He says it's the understanding that we come from British Protestantism. But we can actually stretch it a little further, because we're not all British. We're not all Anglican. We're not all English. We're German and we're French. A lot of us come from a good number of us come from Northern Europe. So there's this Protestantism in Northern Europe, and it's defined who we are, and it's been the definition for. It's been so much of who we are for hundreds of years, and if we're going to have a future, we need to truly remain. That we need to preserve that Protestant heritage to truly remain American. And so Christians got to take it back. Christians got to save it. And Christianity is the way to take it back. I'm not talking about Christianity as a personal faith with the Lord Jesus, but Christianity as we're not Muslim. And we got to get it in. We got to instill it in the law. It's got to be enforced. And some voices can't be permitted to speak. And the problem with all of that, though, is that it isn't Christianity. It isn't the gospel. Although it's being passed off as being the gospel. And when the Israelites exclaimed, "Here are your gods," at the sight of the golden calf, they were attempting to hold on to the God of their history, while fashioning idols for their own purposes. In our world, plenty of shiny false gods still hold power, and idols of Christian nationalism. I'm going here just to name two. Idols of Christian nationalism and self-interest are among them. And like any other good in life, in our lives, Christians are mindful about seeing in love for America the potential temptation that is ever before us. Namely, that the Lord to make our national story more keenly felt than our gospel story. Just because the golden calves seem weirdly outdated doesn't mean that we're any more immune than Israel was from offering God a qualified or confused obedience. So the question is, though, how do Christians respond? Do we take over? Do we pick fights? Do we withdraw? The same kinds of questions that were being asked of different tribal groups in Jesus' day. The Sadducees they said they were colluding with the Roman Empire. The Essenes, another Jewish group, they withdrew down to the Dead Sea. Pharisees said, "Let's do Torah, and that's how we define ourselves." And Zealots said, "Let's pick up the sword and revolt against Rome." And Eugene Peterson talks about another way. He talks about the Jesus way. He wrote a book, a collection of letters together into a book which he gave his son. And he's talking about ways and means. And much of the way Christians relate to the rest of the world has to do with that, with ways and means, and not so much with ends. I mean, ends that matter, they're important, but ways and means, how you get there, really matters too. Christians model the way of Jesus and the life of Jesus, and it's about ways and means. And when it comes to most community engagement, it's natural, for people to be thinking about ways and means. Somehow when we delve into politics, we forget about ways and means, and we go straight to what the ends are. We get concerned all about what and not how. And right now, a lot of what people, and a lot of them Christian, consider to be political engagement with the outside world isn't really engagement at all. It's just putting on the tribal markers, waving the flag, putting on the T-shirt, whatever it is, tribal markers, and they're not interested really in you or whoever it is that they're yelling at, or not even really wanting to talk to you. They're just wanting to tell their people who they are and that they are one of them, and everybody else, they're terrible. And so it really matters. Our engagement is all about that, a lot about that. That we carry the identity markers, that we belong to this tribe and not that tribe. And there's nothing of a long, slow process that happens in communities of listening, learning, conversations that are difficult, often difficult to have, and of character development that comes through loving God and loving your neighbor. It's kind of like saying, yeah, we want Jesus' truth and we want Jesus' life, but we reject Jesus' way. And Jesus could have gone that route. There are all these tribal silos that were all around him. The Sadducees, the Essenes, the Pharisees, the Zealots. All different ways of being Jewish. And really easy, he could have, he didn't join any of them. He could have maybe, joined them by default, by just simply not critiquing them. Not challenging them. But he doesn't do that. Instead, what we have is someone following an entirely different path than everybody else. He doesn't fit neatly into any of the tribal silos that were established in his day. And what does he do? He doesn't identify himself with any of those ideologies that says, this is who I am. It draws lines around who's in and who's out. He brings together a tax collector, Matthew, the tax collector. He invites him into the circle of disciples. He invites this hated collaborator of Rome into the circle. And he invites James and John, the sons of thunder, who hated collaborators, who were zealots, who violently opposed Rome and their collaborators. Jesus brings them together in the disciple circle. And he's also able to confront all of the different ways that idolatry manifests itself in the particular tribal groups. And when he's asked questions, he doesn't have a stump speech with a list of talking points that get repeated over and over and over and over again. He doesn't set up a straw man in order to knock the straw man down. He's listening to people. He's listening to particular individuals of people. He's addressing what's in the heart. He's complicated and nuanced like that. Sometimes he answers questions. Sometimes he refuses to answer questions. Sometimes he responds with a different question. And sometimes he reframes the assumptions behind those questions. And Jesus never has just a simple talking points list of things that he's going to make sure everybody hears. C.S. Lewis said, the devil doesn't send arrows into the world one by one, but two by two on either side. And who doesn't admire courage as a virtue? That's a wonderful thing. Everybody likes. When we see it, we like courageous people. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of that nowadays, but we like it when we see it. And there's this. But in the human body, there's a natural, when we're confronted with danger, there's a natural response. You can do immediately you can do two things. You can make two different choices. When confronted with danger, you can run away, which is called a fight response. You can run away or you can fight. And it's just a basic survival thing. That's what we do. Because, well, it's a good thing. Sometimes it's good to be able to, you have to be able to run away. You can't always fight every fight. Sometimes the best thing you can do is run away. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to fight. And circumstances are different. The challenges aren't always the same. It makes sense sometimes just to stand and fight. Sometimes it makes sense to run away. But you can actually err in going either way. By taking flight, you can err by taking flight. You can err by fighting. Jesus, there's another way. It's not a middle way. It's a totally different way. And it's not taking flight. It's not fighting. And it's something that we see Jesus doing. A non-anxious presence. He just stands non-anxiously present. You can have all kinds of turmoil on the inside with all kinds of fearful responses on the inside, but on the outside, a non-anxious presence. And our God has given us a vision of life lived rightly in justice. The commandments that Moses carried down the mountain to guide us in regard to our neighbors and to treat neighbors the way that we would actually ourselves like to be treated. We've been given a way of living in the commandments, which Micah echoes when he says, it was told you, man, what is good with the Lord, you don't demands of you, only doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with your God. And, right now, a lot of people consider engagement with the outside world, but it's actually not engagement at all, like I just mentioned earlier. It's putting on the tribal markers. And, but Jesus, when we do that, we're not, maybe we want Jesus' truth as we see it through our own eyes. And maybe we want Jesus' life as we see it through our own eyes. But we reject the Jesus way. Jesus himself, he could have gone in any different direction toward any of the tribal silos of his day. He could have aligned himself with the Sadducees, the Essenes, the Pharisees, the Zealots. He doesn't join any one of them. And so he gives us this different way. And he confronts the idolatry of his day in doing it, and by refusing to be a part of any of that. So we have this vision of God for justice to roll down like waters. And it may seem that day is never going to come. It feels like that day is never going to come. And we're actively waiting for those days to come. And we have to decide if the ways of God can be trusted, if God can be trusted. Can God be trusted? And we talk about living toward that promised day. At times it feels like God has forgotten us. And times it feels like, God he's just totally doing up to something. He's asleep. He's up at his mountain retreat, just napping, and he's not even paying attention to us. And so we have to decide these days, can the ways of God be trusted? God is showing us the way, guidance, giving us guidance on how to live with one another. God has graced us with the life of Christ to show us the way. And we know the life of faith is about a love that is less a feeling and more the intentional choice to live for the good of the community, the good of the neighbor. And there are a lot of people who deem such a sacrificial love to be foolish, and it is foolish if God cannot be trusted. It is foolish. The way of life will never work in this world if God isn't God. If God cannot be trusted. So that's the important question. And can God be trusted? And here we are on Sunday morning, choosing to trust God. it's also important for us to show just how we believe the ways of God can be trusted. And I offer this to you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And it's not finished yet. Of course, I did cheat a little bit.